Hello, I'm Andrew Joseph Keith. I'm an artist and sculptor. In this video, I wanted to give you guys some references that you can use for drawing, painting, or sculpture. These are references that I've either sculpted myself. Here's a simplified skull and the Loomis head. And so these I both sculpted, but there's also going to be some references that I just use as an artist, and there will be affiliate links for those if you're interested in that. Simplifications of the head are a great way to help me and others understand the basic structure of the head, the basic lay-in, before you get into all of the details of sculpting the features of the face. So the Loomis head, that one's really popular. This one is basically a sphere, starts with a ball, and then you slice off the edges, these planes of the side, and then you add on a boxy shape for the chin. And here you can see that Loomis head. For more information on the Loomis method, you can check out the video on the Proco channel, how to sculpt the head from any angle, and that goes in depth on this method of understanding the head, the Loomis method. Here's one that I cast in plaster and cleaned up a little bit. Here's a Loomis head type simplification that I've added to a wire armature. If you're interested in wire armatures or figure sculpting, be sure to check out the Proco 3D channel, where I have all of my free content for the figure sculpting and the portrait sculpting course. This one was an assignment where we did simplified versions of the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis, but this video is just focused on the head. So I wanted to make this video in a way where you could kind of scrub through. If you're not interested too much in what I'm saying, I just wanted to explain some of these simplifications, but feel free to just scrub through and pause in areas and use that as a reference for drawing or sculpting or whatever you need. This is those simplifications again in plaster, and then I've just connected them with some pieces of clay, starting with the Loomis head and then a more anatomically correct rib cage rather than just an egg shape for the rib cage. And instead of a box for the pelvis, it's kind of this bucket shape. And there's more information on those simplifications on the main Proco channel. Here's a look at 3 simplifications of the head that I really like. There's the Loomis method, the Bridgman method, and the Bodum method. These are just different ways of simplifying the head. This one is the Bodum method, but adding on the high points of the widest point towards the back of the skull, as well as the cheekbones, the widest point on the facial mass, which are these cheekbones that come forward. And so just a simplified version of the head, adding in some of those high points. This is the Bodum method as it, from the very beginning, the block in. So this is just a simplified version of the head with a plane that tapers towards the front like an axe or a wedge shape. And I love to start my portrait sculptures this way because it's a great simplification. You really don't need to have a lot of information, just a basic likeness from the side view and have it get a little bit wider towards the back of the head. This is the Bridgman method block-in. It's a lot more blocky. I prefer this method if I'm adding the head onto a figure that I've already sculpted. This is an anatomical reference, which I didn't sculpt, but I've used it a lot. In the portrait sculpting course, I went over all of the muscles of the head, and this was really helpful to use as a reference, and I highlighted every one of the muscles that you can see here and went over them in depth in the portrait sculpting course over at proco.com/portrait sculpt. But then also, if you're interested, I'll try to have an affiliate link where you can get this reference if you're interested in just having it, and I just find it to be a useful reference for a generic type head with the anatomy laying in. So there we have that one. The muscles of the head and neck are important. I don't think they're as important as the fat pads, and so I went over the fat pads of the face as well. But the fat pads have a lot more effect on the way the forms of the face than the muscles do, because so many of the muscles are so thin that you can't really see them. They're not like the muscles of your forearm or arms. So this is the skull with those high points that I mentioned, with the cheekbones, the high point towards the back of the skull. You'll notice it's a little bit farther back, and then the center line. These are the areas that I like to focus on early on in a portrait sculpture, and so doing a version of the head where I just laid in with walls of clay that front center line, those cheekbones, and then the widest point towards the back of the head. That is just a way to help me to better understand these high points. And if you get one of these skulls, which is another skull that I'll try to have an affiliate link for if you're interested, then I just find these to be really helpful and useful. And they're small, about half life size, but inexpensive, and I think a very handsome looking skull. I use this skull reference all the time. It's the one that I used for sculpting the skull for the life-size skull sculpture that I've done in the past. And it has a spring in the jaw, so you can stretch it out. You can put things in the jaw if you wanted to keep the jaw open for references for drawing, painting, or sculpting. This is the Proco Skull, so you can find this at proco.com/skull. And this one is made out of really high quality material. It has some weight to it, so it feels very premium. It's a nice premium skull. It's got different characteristics than the other skull, somewhat of a stylized a little bit more than the previous skull. And so if you like this style of skull, you can find that over at proco.com/skull. And again, I'll have an affiliate link for that if you're interested. And this one has magnets, so instead of the spring, it has magnets towards the back, and you can also change the angle and the openness of the jaw. So here's another look at that white plastic skull without the high points, just the basic skull. This one was a fun project. I actually sculpted this out of stone. This is a white marble, and I made it a planar version of the skull, so just the skull, but looking at it as if it was in a 3D program, and you removed some of the polygons so that there's only a certain amount of information and a lot of just flat planes all over the place. But this was a fun project, and I think a good exercise to just understand the planes of the head and the planes of the head and face. A really nice stone. I think this is Carrara marble. And so that was a fun exercise. So there you can see that stone sculpture with all of those planes, all of those flat planes. So my hope with this video is that you'll be able to just pause it at different places. If there's one of these that you like, that you find useful, I hope that you'll draw it or paint it or sculpt it. This one is another assignment from the portrait sculpting course where we did a simplification of the head. This is what I refer to as the secondary forms. So you can see an indication of the brow ridge, the nose, the mound of the mouth, the chin, and the ears, but all of those have been simplified to their most basic form. And I've done a little bit of line work, like with the cheeks that kind of swoops down towards the mouth, just to try to give a little bit more information. When I'm referring to the secondary forms of the head, this is kind of what I'm talking about. And then the primary forms would be more of that Loomis head, where all of the features are removed and it's much more simplified. And then the tertiary forms would be the actual details of the lips, the eyes, the eyelids, the forms inside the ears, and all of that. These are just some simplifications that have helped me as an artist, and so I just wanted to share those with you guys. If you're interested in sculpting, obviously you can check out the portrait sculpting course over at proco.com/portraitsculpt, or the figure sculpting course at proco.com/sculpture. And those are great courses for anybody that wants to get into sculpting. If you want to get any of these references, I appreciate you using the affiliate links. You don't have to, but it helps me out. And as always, I hope you can stay creative, stay productive, and I'll see you in the next video.